for the technical delays, but let's just go ahead and get started. So once again, my name is Justin Wong. I'm the president of AREAA Greater East Bay Chapter. And before we start this event, we wouldn't be able to do these events without our sponsors. Shout out to our double diamond sponsor, Bank of America, our diamond sponsor, Wells Fargo, and our emerald sponsors, HSBC Bank, West, Chase Bank, and Citibank. And so having said that, let me go ahead and introduce you to our AREAA Greater East Bay Chapter Mortgage Chair, Eric Relos. Eric, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep, you guys are fine.
All right. Justin, thank you so much. Again, thank you to the sponsors whom Justin just roll call, and also to the attendees. I'd also like to thank the event organizers, Margaret Lynn, our events chair, John Pack, Vivian Ho, and of course, Keith Azazawa. He's our marketing chair. He put together the email marketing program. Some of you know me, probably most of you don't. As Justin mentioned, I'm the 2020 mortgage chair for AREAA Greater East Bay. I currently work as a residential and commercial mortgage broker with over 20 years of experience in mortgage lending, both as an underwriter and loan originator. I'm pleased to help organize this educational webinar for GEB members and also to moderate the event. So some quick ground rules for Q&A. So I think, Justin, you've muted the group. If you have a question, please use the chat to send your questions, and then I'll go ahead and read your questions for the speakers to answer. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the speakers. Our first speaker is Eileen Chow. I met Eileen back in 2005 when she was with the First American Title. And since then, she's made a successful career transition into commercial lending. So currently, she's a senior commercial banking officer with Bank of the West, and she's definitely well-versed and experienced in both commercial lending, both investor and owner-user, commercial real estate, and business financing, as well as SBA financing, both 7A and the 504 loan programs. Her prior experience includes being an SBA relationship manager at Fremont Bank, and also a senior commercial loan officer at Wells Fargo. And before she jumped into lending, she was a financial advisor for Citibank and Charles Schwab. The next speaker as well is Phillip Wong. I think I met Phil around 2008. Only later did I find out that he's married to Eileen. So we've got a, what do you call it, super couple here. Phil is an SBA franchise lender with Apple Pie Capital. They are a fintech lender specializing in SBA franchise lending. Phil is a prior experience includes being a senior relationship manager in business banking with Bank of the West, and also a commercial banking relationship manager with Preferred Bank and Bank of Communications. So at the 11th hour, we have a nice addition to our speaker panel. She's a good friend of Eileen's. Her name is Kathy Wong. She's a CPA. And Kathy has over 12 years of public accounting experience, specializing in domestic and international tax planning, consulting, compliance for both corporate and private clients. Kathy serves clients in various industries, including real estate. So that's going to be great. High technology, software, manufacturing, financial services, and professional services. And she holds an active CPA license in California. So with the speaker introductions complete, I'd like to start off with the latest news on both the Paycheck Protection Program, which is what I'm going to call PPP, and the economic, impact disaster loan, or the EIDL. Yesterday I was driving to my parents' office to help them apply for both PPP and EIDL. And when I went on the website, the first thing I tried to do is, apply for the EIDL. And on the SBA website, it says that the SBA is unable to accept new applications at this time for the economic injury disaster loan. So as many of you have heard either on a Facebook feed or in the news, it appears that $349 billion that was appropriated for both PPP and EIDL have been exhausted, at least at this time. Because I went on a couple of bank websites, and their websites are indicating the same thing. Now, I've also heard in the news, and you probably have heard as well, that the government is working, or Congress is working on an additional $250 billion of stimulus to give us. I wanted to ask the speakers, and either three of you could chime in. What are you hearing internally from your management as to that second tranche of money?
Eric, everybody, this is Aileen. Hi, thanks for everyone joining. First of all, I do want to say that I'm not representing Bank of the West, and this is really, we're participating on a voluntary basis, basically just to share what we have heard, what we have seen over the last 3 weeks. It's been chaotic. And, we still would like everyone to go back and talk to your CPA, your attorney, if you have further questions, because really this session is really just on a sharing basis. We're not giving any legal advice here. And, really just want to, share with everybody what we know. Everyone is scrambling for information. It's been a very confusing rollout of this program. And we've heard a lot of clients getting very, very stressed, trying to find a lender. 3 weeks ago, exactly on a Friday, three weeks ago, that's when the official application started for the PPP. And, and 3 weeks later, the funds are out. So, it's just a very quick program, not very well prepared. So anyway, so with that said, I just want to tell everyone, like Eric said, the funds have run out. And as of right now, we're just waiting to see if the additional $250 billion is going to pass or not. And as of right now, nobody knows. And I heard from the news as well that they're voting at 1 o'clock as we speak. Does anyone know if that is indeed happening? So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we'll just have to assume that they are, and that hopefully the Democrats and the Republicans come to a meeting of the minds. I know the Dems blocked it because they wanted to make sure that healthcare and our frontline medical workers got, part of that new stimulus package. So, I think that's the roadblock. Again, I think they just need to pass it because there's a lot of businesses out there that still need this. As you know, a lot of, and if you've shared, a lot of big businesses have gotten the stimulus, or their applications have been processed first, with smaller businesses sort of waiting at the back of the line. What's been your experience, Eileen?
So first of all, let me just give an overview of the difference between the EIDL and PPP, because again, there's just so much confusion out there. People were confused about EIDL and people were confused about PPP. So first of all, EIDL is the program that you have to apply on SBA's website. It's sba.gov. Now, it's been several weeks now, and most likely the funds have already run out for the EIDL. And the EIDL is a program where you can get $10,000, which is a grant, more like an advancement, really, they call it, but it's a grant, it's forgivable if you do get it, that is. And then in addition to that, you can apply through SBA.gov for a loan, which is up to $2 million. The loan itself is amortized over 30 years at 3.75% fixed. Okay, so that's the EIDL. The other one, which is the PPP everyone is talking about, is the 349 billion that has already run out, and this is the payroll protection program. The application started on April 3rd, and the first day, I think B of A was probably the first big bank, one of the first banks that actually rolled out their online application, but it was very chaotic. So the PPP, what it is that it's a program where you can get a portion, forgivable if you do get approved. So basically, what this program is if you own a business 500 employees or less, or if you are a sole prop, self-employed, independent contractors, you are eligible to apply. Now, again, when these programs rolled out, just a lot of unanswered questions, because as this is a program that's very new, is unlike the 7A or the 504 that we've been doing for a very long time, and there are credit guidelines that are already set, and this one is just so new. So we do get a lot of questions that even lenders, banks, we can't answer. So that's why we're not here to give any advice. We're only able to provide you information that we do know. For very long, several weeks, banks were still waiting for directives from SBA. So anyway, and
so Eileen, quick
Sure.
question before you continue. Seems like the 349 billion was for the Paycheck Protection Program, and then maybe there was another money set aside for EIDL. Now, both, all of you, Eileen, Phil, Kathy, do you know anybody, do you have any clients that applied for EIDL that has already received their 10,000, whether it was the grant or maybe larger?
That's a good question. So I have heard a few people, yes, that have gotten the 10,000. However, when the EIDL first launched on SBA's website, it was supposed to be a 3-day turnaround. Now, of course, that's not true. And a lot of the people that applied, their application is still pending because they have received millions of applications on an annual basis. The SBA office only has the capacity to process 60,000 loans on an annual basis. So this is way over their capacity, and your application as of right now is most likely still pending. And how long is it going to take for them to get through every single application? At this point, nobody can even answer you. So, if you try to call SBA or if you try to email them, I don't think you'll be able to hear back because they're just so overwhelmed.
So going back to ESBA, so I mean, I applied for that. I'm like, heck, I'll take a $10,000 grant. I haven't heard anything at all, whether a call, a letter, or an email from SBA regarding that. But for those people who did get their EIDL money, did they say how long it took, and how were they notified that they got the money?
Yeah, I really don't know, Eric, because I haven't heard from my clients. I haven't heard from anybody that that has gotten it. What I've heard is that some people did get it. This is from the media. So I really don't, not personally, I don't know anyone that I know have gotten it.
Okay.
I haven't heard anybody getting the EIDL neither. I do have clients who have gotten their PPP loan successfully, so they got actually money in their bank. That was they applied for it the first couple of days. I think Friday was the first day that some banks take application. They apply the following Monday, and they got the fund like a few days ago.
Okay. I heard the same thing. So for a while, I was briefly associated with Rubicon Mortgage Fund, and they put us all on furlough. and they applied for it early on. And this week we all got a call saying that they got awarded the money. They want us to come back on. All right. So it looks like that the EIDL for now is what we call a black box. Nobody knows what's going on there. Nobody's heard anything. A lot of applications are pending, and who knows when any one of us will hear directly or know of anybody that hears directly and actually receives the money for that program. So let's move over to the Paycheck protection program. I know, Eileen, you've touched on it briefly. I know some of the banks I mentioned earlier, for example, Bank of America, I went on their website and I saw this, the minute you go on there, it says, you may be seeing reports that the Small Business Administration has said the initial $349 billion in the Paycheck Protection Program has been committed. In hopeful anticipation that additional funds are provided by Congress, we will continue to process applications. So it looks like B of A are still processing applications that are coming in anticipation of that additional $250 billion. So that's good news. I think maybe they're optimistic. It's kind of same thing with Comerica. So like, why don't we go on that sort of optimistic look? I think that's the nature of our business. We're all in mortgage and we're all in real estate sales. And if we weren't optimistic, we wouldn't be in this business or industry. So I came up with some set of questions to get this webinar going. So when I was helping my parents with their PPP application, I noted that there's two applications. There's a lender application and a borrower application. So do you need to complete both or just one? And how do you know which one to use?
So Eric, I'm gonna have Phil touch on that.
Okay.
So every single lender processes their things differently. If you look at every single lender, either they have it really posted online to do it as an electronic document. Like us, we actually have everything posted online to do it as an electronic document or DocuSign. Some of the banks are catching up to that, which is kind of slow on their end. But you typically would use the SBA PPP form that's specifically from your lender, because that form from your lender it's probably gone through changes before they even pushed it out the program. So the changes that it went through was probably like 3 or 4 different changes. So go to your lender, ask them for that form instead of pulling it from the SBA website, because the lender already downloaded the most current form for that.
Okay, got it. And so wanted to ask this question. Of the PPP applications that you've either received or processed, how many have been for real estate or mortgage companies that are seeking to borrow? Since
That would be a question
real estate and mortgage.
Answer, unfortunately, Eric. Yeah, we won't be able to answer that question because really we have, special task teams to process these applications, and we don't have the data on that, unfortunately.
Okay, got it. That's fair. And the PPP, can you briefly go over the terms of that loan?
Yeah, so with the PPP, the maximum loan amount is $10 million and is fixed at 1% interest rate for 2 years. And there's a deferment for 6 months of payment. Okay. This is for the non-forgivable portion.
Okay, for the non-forgivable. So how much is forgivable and how much do you have to pay? How is that determined? So
this is how you do your calculation, because SBA is going to be asking for payroll records, and it's average 12 months of payroll, okay, and average 12 months of payroll, so times 2.5 is how much you can apply. Now, the 75% has to apply to your payroll after you get the money within, which you have to apply the money to payroll in 8 weeks after you get the money. And then this portion, if you do apply the money to your the funds to payroll, then you have to go back to your lender after 8 weeks to provide documentation, and then they'll apply for the forgivable for you.
Okay,
So I just wanted to add something about the payroll. I've been working with my clients these past few weeks on the application of the PPP loan, and when they need to submit their application, they need to provide also the support for the payroll, because that's the loan amount that they are applying for. And I know there are payroll service provider, including ADP and others as well, who's now have the capability of generating the report for these PPP application. So if you're interested in getting the loan and the supporting document, talk to your payroll service provider. They already have their report generated, and then it will be a package that you can attach to your application, and that will include all the information they need for the payroll calculation part.
And then also, Eric, there is one important point that I do need to make, and it is that any employees that their salary, if it's over 100,000, is so the calculation is capped at 100,000. So for example, let's say you're paying your employee 150,000, you have to subtract the 50,000. You're only eligible to count up to the 100,000 salary. So that's very important to know, because we get a lot of questions from for example, a lot of the realtors, because commission is also part of it, right? Commissions, tips, your 1099, all of it is, eligible, but then you are capped at 100,000. So when you, do the calculation divided by 12, 100,000 is about 8,300 and change. So multiply by 2.5, I believe it comes out to be what, like 20,000 or so?
I think that math is correct, around $20,500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's important
and
to keep that in mind. I know, everyone is anxious to apply, but it doesn't mean you can, get more than that.
Yeah, thank you, Eileen, for that. That's a great point. And I also saw the cap being calculated at those payroll report that the payroll service provider put together.
And just be aware, and just be aware the tax documents that you can actually include as the 940, 941s. If you don't have a complete package, a lot of the lenders will reject it right off the bat and go to the next person. So if you're planning to have people who want to apply for the PPP program, have a complete package, because that's going to waste a lot of people's time. In the last 2 weeks, if I look at my queue and how many ones that I'm working on and how many ones that I'm processing within running compliance checks and stuff like that, I can honestly tell you 3 days of running compliance checks, I've done over 300 files. And then on the back end to run, look at payroll documentation, I've run over 400 files. And that's within 3 days of time doing that stuff. So the amount of work that we're putting through this aspect is just the it's very time consuming, but if it's not a complete package, you're just going to be shoved to the back end, and someone else would pick up the file later and say, hey, you're missing these documents, and that's what slows down the process itself.
So are they asking for, in terms of the time frame for the information, my understanding is it's full year 2019, first quarter 2020, is that correct?
You can do, so say for instance, you have March 2019 to March 2020, that's okay. If you just have, it has to prove that you were still in business as of February 15th, 2020.
Okay. Got it. And so they take that information. So what else? I know you, Eileen, you categorized, so salaries, commissions, tips.
Your 2019, if you haven't filed your tax return, your business tax return, or if you're on Schedule C, if you haven't filed for 2019, I think most of us, we haven't, including myself.
you have to prepare your 2019 profit and loss and balance sheet. And that's very important. And also lenders, what I've been hearing is also you need to provide 2018 business tax return as well.
Okay.
So we talked about this, Eric, that if you are working from home and if you saved everything at your work computer in the office, you know, you may not have them ready to submit. So you got to get them ready. When you're, you know, when you're ready to submit, you got to have all these documents ready to upload to the bank. Many banks, they do have the online application and the online portal for you to upload these documentations. Some of them are probably not very easy to navigate. I heard B of A, it was so confusing for its customers that when they finish with all the documentation, there's no submit button. So it was a very frustrating experience for a lot of their customers. And then some other banks, for example, like Chase, they simply don't even have an online application. All you can do is go on their website, leave your contact information, and their bankers are reaching out, contacting their, you know, these clients on an individual basis, which is, I mean, you can imagine you're waiting in the queue for them to contact you and then you start the process. So it's a very time consuming and tedious process. But, you know, what we've been, you know, seeing is that a lot of the institutions do have the online application up already. So if they're still taking application, that's great. When it first launched, a lot of the banks just, you know, service their existing bank customers, their existing business bank customers. So, but, you know, for the last week, I've been hearing a lot of companies, even non-direct lenders that are participating. So that list, it is on the SBA website, and you can also reach out to me. I can also, you know, let you know, who's taking non-bank applications as well, if they're still participating.
So I wanted to clarify the supporting documentation that's required. So if you're self-employed or and you file a schedule or you have a Schedule C, basically it's just 2019 Schedule C, or if you haven't filed 2019, you give them 2018 Schedule C and a P&L for 2019.
I think it's if you haven't filed 2019, you still have the income and expenses for 2019 ready, even though you haven't filed your tax return.
So you just give them a standard like P&L statement?
Yes, and I think probably they will ask, I'm not sure from the bank side, I would think that they would still ask for the 2018 return that has been filed, the Schedule C, but 2019, I don't think you have to have your return file in order to provide the documentation. You can put together the income and expenses. That's my understanding from
That's correct, Kathy.
latest.
Yeah, that's correct.
And is it also similar for somebody, for a small business that's set up as an 1120S, you know, an S Corp, right? So basically, if they haven't filed 2019 yet, they provide their 1120S for 2018 and a P&L for 2019.
And balance sheet.
And and balance sheet, all right.
So I don't know if is the tax return required for the bank. I think if it's an entity, if it's an 1120S and S Corp, if the business applies, I think it depends on the payroll instead of the Schedule C. Schedule C is for sole proprietors or independent contractor who doesn't have a separate entity.
Got it. So if it's a company with employees, it's really the payroll information. But if it's self-employed, independent, more, you know, which is mostly what real estate and mortgage professionals are, they're mortgagers. So it's really that Schedule C, if that's how they're filing it, or maybe an 1120S if they're incorporated.
Yes.
Or if you have 1099s.
Or 1099. Okay, yeah, all right. Appreciate that. In addition to those things, and, you know, for the self-employed people, like, you know, real estate agents, is there any other type of supporting documentation required?
Not that we know of. I mean, I think 1099 really captures your commission, right? and your 18 tax return on schedule. I mean, if you're a sole prop. I mean, I also want to mention that the PPP, if you do, I mean, it rents mortgage interest, meaning let's say, for example, if you own an owner user commercial property, you have mortgage interest, and then utilities, all of these are eligible expenses.
So well, they're eligible expenses that you could use the PPP money for, right? So in addition
Correct.
to payroll, you could use it to pay mortgage interest, utilities, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think you need to be at a minimum of 75% for payroll in order to qualify for the forgiveness.
Correct.
Okay.
I think
And
what everyone, Eric, what everyone needs to know is that you have to assume the worst, right? If, let's say, they don't approve the forgivable portion, even though this particular loan, there's no personal guarantee, there's no collateral. But at the same time, it is a loan if you don't get the approval for the forgivable portion. And it's a 2-year loan, you still have to pay back. And
so
it gets reported, right? So I just want to, let everyone be mindful when how you're using this money. Yes, if you do get the forgivable, then it's great, right? You don't have to pay back, but you do have to assume that what you apply for, you don't know if you're going to get it, forgive or not. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that, hey, at the end of the day, it may turn into a 2-year loan at 1%. It's still
okay.
paid. Yeah.
So to repeat what you said, assume the worst, best case scenario, it's forgiven and everyone's happy. Worst case scenario, you owe that money, you're going to have to pay it back with a 2-year window at a 1% interest.
Yes. And I also heard stories that what you apply, it may not be the amount that's approved.
I see. Now, how do they determine that? I mean, you kind of give them for example, on a W-2 basis, right? You give them your payroll information. The math is going to be, I assume, pretty straightforward. You're going to have your total monthly payroll adjusted for any folks that make over 100,000, and then you're going to multiply that by 2.5, and that's what your loan request is. So the SBA or the lender can come back to you and say, hey, I know that you asked for $500,000. We're only going to give you 400,000.
It could be that there's, discrepancy with with your calculation versus the lender's calculation. This is first come, first serve. So there could be discrepancy the way how you calculate versus how the lenders calculate. That's all.
And then you're also signing an attestation to the lender, which means that you're acknowledging to everything it's true and correct. Even on the SBA form, everything has to be true and correct. If it's incorrect, it gets kicked out. Then you're going to have to go back in someone's queue again, and you're going to start all over. So SBA forms are basically a legal obligation for you and the government too. So just be aware this money can't be spent just frivolously on anything. So, you have to provide enough documentation so you can get approved. If documentations are not clear, then you won't get your approval, and even the banks won't even touch your file.
And going back to the portion where it becomes forgivable if you're using, as Kathy said, a minimum of 75% on payroll related expenses. So let's say a business applies, they get the money, and what is it, 60, 90 days later, they got to show the SBA that where they actually spent the money, sort of like as an audit to prove that it should be forgiven?
They're supposed to spend the money in 8 weeks of payroll.
Okay, 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So how's that proven?
You either put out a 941 because your payroll expenses go out and the government, you have to report it to the government. That's how it's proven.
Okay. Got it. And then for somebody that's self-employed, like most real estate professionals, I mean, they could say, hey, that money, it's 100% my commission, and then what, they just pay themselves? What is their reporting obligation?
That's a good question that I don't think we have the answer to, Eric. Like I said, this program, there's a lot of questions from the public that we don't have answers to.
Especially on the self-employed side, it's going to be much harder, just because of the fact that the program wasn't created at first for the 1099s or things like that. That's why the name Payroll Protection Program came into play. It's specifically for payroll as they carved it out. So there was a lot of banks don't know how to process even 1099s. A lot of places have also rejected people who just say, here's my payroll, this is how much I'm paying myself, and just put it on a sheet of paper and say they're paying themselves for a rent.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, self-employed, sole proprietors, or contractors, the application actually started the week after the April 3rd. It was April 10th was when the window opened for self-employed professionals.
Okay. So I understand it's easy, if you're a company and you have W-2 employees, there's typically a payroll bookkeeper does all that. It's easy. For a real estate agent or somebody in mortgage that's, also on 100% commission, that income is variable. It's not like, hey, you're going to get a salary bump of 5%, right? So that income is variable. So I guess either if they need to show their 2018, or if they've already filed 2019, and really that's going to be the basis for calculating what monies or what loan amount they should apply for, right?
Yeah, again, Eric, there's no documentation, there's no mentioning of anything specifically, for mortgage brokers or, realtors, nothing specific to that. And, you can only really rely on, I guess, common sense, right? Your average 1099, your 2018, because there's just no information out there that explains any of that.
So when you're applying for this, if you're a real estate agent or a mortgage professional that's 100% commission, is it prudent then to err on the conservative side and kind of like lowball the number, given the fact that you may have to pay this loan back? Like what are your thoughts on that? Everybody on the speaker panel.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any, again, it's hard for us to answer that question because I personally haven't heard of any mortgage brokers or realtors that have successfully gotten the money. What I've been hearing is businesses, especially self-employed, you're the second wave that, you were able to apply the week after. And so I think most of these applications are probably still in the queue waiting to be processed. And also, one thing I do want to remind everyone is that when you go and apply, okay, so how lenders get paid for this particular program, the SBA doesn't charge the normal SBA fee to the borrower, right, to the applicant. There's no fee to apply. The lender, however, they do get a processing fee. So, in reality, if you are a big VIP customer with a bank, you may get priority over, let's say if you're applying for $1 million versus somebody who's applying for 50,000. I don't know how these banks are prioritizing these applications, but I think there are some truth to it, is that they're most likely gonna, process the ones that are requesting more because they do get paid, and maybe banks that are premier clients with the bank. I don't know. I'm just saying that there is some truth to it.
So just to add on to the question about how much would be the loan amount for sole proprietorship, for Schedule C, I think there was some interim guidance that was issued a couple of days ago on the 14th by the SBA. And if you are a Schedule C taxpayer, they will rely on your 2019 net income. So for real estate people who have commissions and everything, that's the gross. And if you have expenses and deductions to offset the income, the net amount is the amount for the loan. And I think that's also divided by 12 and times 2.5, similar to the payroll. And that's considered your loan amount. But that's something very preliminary. We don't have much information on the details, but then that's the big picture calculation for Schedule C taxpayers.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. It seems like, I think from what I've read, from what I've heard, it appears that the large banks have a bias towards their, of course, obviously existing customers, but also I've heard from a bias towards their customers that they have loans with. Because
it's actually not even a bias, Eric. So banks, basically, they don't have the infrastructure to handle something of this magnitude. And they can only take care, so they have to put the priority to their existing business clients. So when B of A first launched the application, their guideline, or to be eligible as a quote B of A customer, is they're not just talking about having a consumer account with B of A. You need to have a business relationship opened by a certain date, and you need to have a business lending product with them. And then they got criticized. And the next day they changed their criteria that, okay, in addition to, you don't need to have a lending product with B of A, but you do need to, you can have a business account, but you cannot have other business lending with, outside institutions. So their criteria is very strict because they can only handle, certain amount of applications, right? So their parameter is very, very tight.
Okay.
Even such a big bank, they have so many clients. And then, yes, a lot of the banks, they're only processing for their existing, business clients. And as of last, or maybe I think beginning of this week, more and more lenders or non-banks are participating to service the existing customers to those banks.
Okay, so if for example, B of A will only help B of A business banking clients, and I don't bank there, I could go to another bank that can help me with a PPP application. Is there a list that you can share? Not now, but maybe that we, AREAA GEB can disseminate on behalf of our members who are looking for banks that can help them?
So I don't specifically have a list per se, but I do know of a few non-bank institutions that are participating in this. And now the funds have run out. I don't know if they continue to accept applications in anticipation of the 250 billion to pass. So as of today, I don't know, but I can of course share that information, reach out to me individually, and I'll be more than happy to tell you what I do know that, that we're processing non-bank customers.
Okay. I took a glance at the time. It's 1:55. We're kind of knocking on the hour. So, taking the optimistic view that the 250 billion appropriation will be approved by Congress, for those real estate agents, mortgage professionals, small businesses who haven't applied yet, while we're waiting, and this could change today, as you mentioned, they're voting on it. Like, what would you recommend to them in terms of, and I think you may have, Phil may have answered this earlier. What should they do? What should they be doing now? What information should they be gathering so that when it's announced that the 250 billion is available, that they're ready to go, with their bank? What would be your recommendation?
I would say definitely get all of the documentation ready, and also reach out to these different institutions and see if they continue to accept applications during this time. And if they are, go ahead and submit it and not wait, because as you can imagine, there are still a lot of unprocessed applications that are already in the queue. So by the time they get to your application, this is already the 3rd week. So we're talking about at the end of the program already. So when they do open this up, the people that are already in queue, banks will continue to push these applications, to get approval from SBA. So you really have to be ready, and try to find a company or an institution that's willing to take your application right now.
Okay. At this point, I'm sort of exhausted with my questions. We could open it up to any questions from the attendees. Given a time, let's limit it to like around 5 questions. If there's any questions from attendees.
Eric, there's a couple questions on the chat queue. If you want to double check.
Yeah, so I saw one. I know.
Quickly, the additional money will run out. That was one question.
Yeah. So Susan Anderson asks, where do we reach out to get the list of non-bank lenders participating in PPP? I answered that. Eileen can provide that. I guess
I'm gonna put on the chat of my contact information here.
Okay. I'm gonna put Eileen. Okay, you got it. All right, thank you, Eileen.
Okay. Best to email me. Just to give you an idea how quickly the funds have been running out. As of Monday, right? 250 billion were already approved. And just to give you some stats, California got almost 21 billion. New York only got 11.8 billion. Texas, however, I think Texas got 21, almost 22 billion. And what's really interesting, let's see, Minnesota 33.8, Ohio, oh sorry, no, those were the approved thousands of loans, sorry. I'm just trying to see like which state actually got the most. And I think New York 11.8, California 20, almost 21 billion. Yeah, Texas I think is the one that actually got the most.
Mm-hmm.
And what's very interesting, I'm paying attention to the media just as all of you guys are, that we've been learning about these companies that are getting, let's say for example, I don't know if you guys heard, Ruth Steakhouse is not a small business, it's publicly traded. It got 20 million approved. So, and then here you have these true small businesses in the same pool trying to get 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 versus these companies that have gotten 20 million. Another story I read, another publicly traded company, even though, it's still within that 500 less employees, right? It's got 240 employees worldwide, got 140 employees here in the US. The company is based in Fremont. It's got 2.9 million approved. And here you are, just thinking like, okay, technically, if you look at the SBA eligibility, these businesses technically do not qualify for SBA. However, this program is not your regular 7A or 504. They don't follow those rules. But you're competing with these businesses that are getting millions and millions of funds. So I don't know. Personally, I just feel like this program is very chaotic, very messy, and it just leaves a lot of true small business owners out dry without funds, scrambling, trying to find a bank that is ready to take their application to help them.
Yeah. So George Brito asked a question, how quickly do you think the additional money will run out? And I think that's the 250 billion.
I think it will run out very fast because 2 weeks of time, it already reached 250 billion, worth of applications. And we're talking about applications that are waiting on the sideline right now. And they probably have already been processed. They're just waiting for the funds to open up, and then the banks will push them to SBA to get what is called the E-Tran number. And once you get the E-Tran number, meaning you're already approved, they're ready to, the bank is ready to, work on funding. So you already have a pool of people that are waiting, and we don't even know how many, applications that are in that pool right now.
Yeah, that's the wild card. But I would agree. I would think a lot of that a good portion of that 250 billion is already spoken for by applications in the queue. So I guess the piece of advice is, as you mentioned earlier, get your information ready. Get together with your bank, or in this case, if you need a non-bank, reach out to Eileen and work on that application, send it in.
There's no guarantee, Eric. Unfortunately, as of right now, there's no guarantee that these non-bank or companies that are still accepting applications, because here's what they're dealing with, right? For example, let's just say Phil, they're processing hundreds and hundreds of applications, spending, hours and hours on these files. But guess what? It's a lot of manpower, and yet if these applications don't get approved, they don't get a penny. So we have to take into consideration that, whether or not these companies are still accepting applications. And I don't know what to say. Yeah, Rolly.
So when you say they don't get a penny, you mean companies like Phil don't get a penny for helping?
Well, only for the approved applications.
Got it.
Yep.
All righty. I've exhausted my questions. Any other questions here? Okay, so Susan made a comment. Only 1% of California applicants receive loans, so many are still in the queue. That's what we've been hearing. If there are no other questions, I'll say it's a wrap. Justin, do you want to take it back and end the meeting?
Yeah, no worries. Once again, Eileen, Kathy, Phillip, thank you so much for your time. And to our attendees, my apologies for the technical difficulties earlier. Obviously Zoom webinar, it's a new feature that us as a chapter, and I'm sure plenty of other organizations are still adjusting to. But what I will do is I will repost this video so you can hear the audio, you can get the content, for future references moving forward. Obviously, you guys now have Eileen's contact information, so let's go ahead and keep that in mind. And the last thing I just want to recap for next week is next week we also, obviously we do have webinars for content and information about what's going on within the industry. And I know that a lot of us are working from home, shelter in place. Next Thursday, we're also going to have a meditation webinar with Gavin Massimia on Thursday at 9:00 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Eric, any other comments? Outside of that, I appreciate you being the moderator for this event.
No other comments. Again, panel, thank you very much.
Eric, I saw one very good question that I do want to answer. I think that was from Jean Joe. Is that whether or not you can apply through different institutions. That's very interesting. So you can only get one of the loan, one loan, okay? So if you, we're trying, this is like a race, right? You submit your application and hoping that the bank or, this company who's processing your application can get to it as quick as you can. But really, you're only eligible for one loan. So let's say if, one company process your application faster than the other, you gotta make sure to let one of them to cancel, withdraw your application with the other one, because you cannot apply. Well, I mean, you cannot technically get 2 loans. So hopefully that clears up the confusion as well.
So internally, the SBA they don't know. Like, so say for example, I went to 3 different places and applied, and the first place says, hey, you got approved. So, you know, the SBA doesn't know, like, hey, you know,
They should, but again, you know, this is it's very messy out there right now, and you're also looking at, you know, what the SBA office, I mean, I don't know what the capacity is. In case there is a glitch that you get approved for 2, you're not supposed to take it. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay, so the burden is on the borrower to let the SBA know if they got approved.
If you're lucky enough.
Okay.
And
It's
also,
like winning the it's like winning the lotto.
Yeah, correct.
Wow. Okay.
All right.
All right. If there's no,
I think we're good.
all right, guys.
All right.
Well, to
Thank you.
everyone that attended, thank you so much for your time, and stay safe out there.
Yep. Eileen, Phil, Kathy, thank you. Justin, thank you. All the attendees and sponsors, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.